Okay, I will start putting people in. So people should be joining now. Actually, something perhaps quicker is, there we go, people will join by themselves. Okay, all right, so I guess we can start now. All right, so thanks to everyone who has joined us today. We are very happy to be able to explain to you the careers of three experts of the space industry, all based in the UK, but they are careers which made them discover the world a bit, or perhaps discover different companies and different types of companies in the UK. So this webinar is part of, or organized by SGAC. SGAC is a global organization of young professionals, young students, and we organize events across Europe and across the world. The main idea of this is to link students, young professionals, and experts from the space industry to discuss a few topics of the space industry, and then report the resolutions of these discussions to the UN COPUOS. So if you go on the website of SGAC, you have all the information you want, and then perhaps join us at one of the events or one of the webinars. So the structure of this webinar is going to be organized around 10 minutes of presentation of the career of each of the speakers, so Neil, Cassia, and Stephen. These brief presentation of their careers during 10 minutes will be followed by 5 minutes of Q&A on their careers. So you can post the questions in the chat, and then I will read them and read them out loud, and then our nice experts will answer them. And then at the end, we have 10 minutes of Q&A where everyone can ask their questions, the most random ones, and we try to answer them as best as we can. So if that's good to go, Cassia, you're the first one. So go for it. What is your career path?
All right. So maybe I start just with a short introduction. My name is Cassia Babaker, and I'm a technical officer and space segment engineer at the European Space Agency.
If you want to keep going, because we have this one table of presentation to do first.
Hello.
Who are you?
Hello, my name is Neil McManus. I'm currently a consultant to the Ministry of Defence in the UK, and I've been working on satellites for about 20 years now.
Stephen, if you want to do a short presentation.
My name's Stephen Brown, and I've probably nearly been 20 years in the satellite industry, and I'm currently the CTO of SatixFy Space Systems.
Okay, I'm Rafael Milamares. I'm a system engineer in Airbus in the UK in Stevenage, where I've worked with these three speakers in the past. Okay, so Cassia, you're the first to go.
All right. Thank you, Rafael. That's really cool for you as well to organize the webinar and getting us involved. So thanks for that. All right. So as I said, I work as a technical officer and a space segment engineer at ESA in the Telecommunication and Integrated Applications Directorate, and our offices are located here in the UK and in Harwell campus. But maybe let me start from the beginning. So I obtained my Master in Science degree in Electrical Engineering in Poland. And it was a 5-year degree study, and during which I was also very lucky to be selected for Erasmus Student Exchange program, which allowed me to spend 1 year abroad, living and studying in Italy. So great experience, really good academic experience, and also that marked my first international travel in my career development plan. So after that, I returned, I completed my degree. I've got my master's, and I immediately, straight after, I've got a job at LG Electronics as a young R&D engineer. So LG Electronics develops and manufacture the customer electronics. So very different type of products to what we developed in the space sector. Nevertheless, it offered me a start in my career path, but also opportunity to learn about the R&D, as well as the volume manufacturing. And despite we were developing a very, very different products, I learned a lot about the processes and quality assurance, etc. Something which now is really has become really useful. And also within that job, I got seconded, and I spent a few months in South Korea learning how the R&D is done in the headquarters. So my next position then was much more related to the space sector, as I worked as an optical engineer in CENER. CENER Ingeniería y Sistemas is a Spanish company, so I relocated to Madrid. And then I worked with the Earth observation project and scientific instrument development. So if we think about it, I moved countries, of course, but I also transitioned from the very high volume production in LG Electronics to development of a very specific single unit, very, very specific instrumentation for space. And also during my time at CENER, I also was relocated and seconded to the Institute of Astronomy of the Russian Academy of Science. So I spent 1 year in Moscow working on a project in collaboration with CENER, of course. So then, after that, I went back to Madrid and continued with my job. And in 2010, I took a very difficult decision to leave industry altogether and return back to academia. So I applied for the EU Marie Curie Fellowship and was awarded it. And that allowed me to relocate here to the UK and join UCL, so University College London, for my PhD study. And I did a PhD in photonic integration, which back then was a very novel technology. It is being much more used these days for various applications. But also my PhD program was part of the international training network, which means it allowed me to, again, go abroad and study. And I was lucky enough to be able to join work and do experiments with Thales Research Lab in France. And then after that, I progressed with my career at university. So I went through various roles, including the research associate, so a postdoc position, then the senior research fellow, which meant I've got my own individual funding from the UKRI. And finally, a lecture position, which allowed me to start my own small research group. So here again, I was very lucky to find and work with super capable and skilled PhD students, great team. And I think, yes, I was their academic supervisor, but for me, it was always about the teamwork. And here also, we were developing these photonic integrated circuits for space applications. And while working in academia, also 4 years actually before leaving academia to now join ESA, I changed my work arrangement and I was sharing my time between Airbus and UCL. So in addition to UCL academic path, I also was working for industry. And that was a very unique experience in a sense that it required navigating through the academic and industrial environments. And out of a sudden, you find out that people communicate differently and they have different priorities and different KPIs, etc. And it took some time to adapt, but it was a fantastic experience. So at Airbus as well. So I worked at Airbus as a senior photonic system engineer, but I also got nominated to the Airbus expert in telecom payload photonics. So expert path. So probably we can say I narrowed down and went towards a very specialized topic in a very, very specific area, kind of coming from the system all the way to the laser semiconductor structure. And then I took yet another very difficult decision because I needed to leave not one, in this case, position, but actually two. So two positions, two teams to eventually join European Space Agency. So in brief, that is my story. And please go ahead with questions if you like to ask for some additional details.
Brilliant. Wow, what a career. Okay, so everyone, if you have questions, please ask them in the chat. I've got some already, so I can ask them. But yeah, I mean, go for it for the questions. They are the priority here. The first question I have, Kasia, is how did you find your fellowship? You know, you are in Spain, working in Spain. How did you come to find this PhD?
Internet.
Really?
Yes. So all the PhD positions are advertised either at the university websites, so you can you can kind of browse through that, or also the under the Marie Curie scheme. You could also have opportunities being announced. So really just browsing internet. I think the only important thing to mention is that I found those positions and been offered those positions before relocating to another country.
I see.
Yeah.
We have two questions in the chat. The first one is from Summer. What age? Oof, a lot of questions coming. What age were you when you started your PhD?
Right. So I refrain to giving the exact number, but I can say that I worked for almost 5 years in industry before leaving and joining the academia again. Which is perhaps not a typical career path, but I've got my master's, so you can kind of calculate, and then I worked for industry for 5 years before leaving again.
Okay, I see.
I hope that helps to answer the question.
I think it's a good answer. Oh, good question. How did you find the transfer out of academia and into ESA?
No, so I transferred first from UCL. So I worked part-time at UCL and part-time at Airbus. I think the right answer is that those are two very different environments. So we need to be prepared for that. And I think even if you transition, just leave academia and then move to industry, you transition once. What I was experiencing for almost 4 years is seeing it on the weekly basis, both of them. And that really gives you this very good picture that in order to often bridge between academia and industry, person needs to adapt. Is as I said, people communicate differently. One environment is focused very much at the research, and the research outcome are the publications, and the other one is very much business driven, right? So it's business oriented, and we need to be mindful of that. Yeah.
Okay. Question from Sam Ravi. What are some of the obstacles you faced in your journey? And what advice do you have for those starting early careers?
Well, I think there are always obstacles, and they can be of different form and shape. But I think what is important to remember that whenever there is an obstacle, there always can be an opportunity. And I think it's important to look for those opportunities, something that may come your way, something that someone can recommend or suggest, just listen, have kind of look what's around and what opportunities there are. And if you see one, just jump on it.
Okay. One question from Johnny Parkinson Swift. Hello, Cassia. How did you navigate from a non-space related industry into the space sector? Were there any additional training opportunities that you had to take to enable it? Mm-hmm. He's currently in the construction industry as a QA engineer, and he's hoping to make the move soon.
All right. Yeah, I think this is a very good question because indeed, I didn't have any background in space sector. I had background in electronics, so that was my domain. And my employer just was looking for people with my expertise or a young graduate. And yeah, they hired me with the understanding that I don't have a background in space domain. So I think that is very common. There are people who are very specialized and finish the academic career already with that angle of the space applications. But there are many, many others who absolutely didn't follow that route. So the fact that it's absolutely okay to apply for a job position which is coming from the space industry, or which has to do with space, even when you don't have a previous experience in space. I think that's absolutely okay. It's something that you can learn on the job, and then when the employer hires you, they are aware of that and they would provide the special training. So absolutely don't worry.
Nice. We have a technical question, but a quick one. From Amol Dalmad. Nice overview, Cassia. I have a technical question. How much portion of telecom payload is photonics based in satellites? Which systems, to be specific?
Depends on the satellite, right? Yeah, so photonics is being implemented more and more, both in the scientific satellites as well as the telecommunications. Optical fibers are used very often for various applications. Yeah, I'm not sure there is a known ratio. I would say the main domain is still RF and digital, but optics and photonics is playing bigger and bigger role.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have 1 minute left, perhaps just enough for one question. What is your process to make your mind? Oh, sorry. What is the process to make your mind in such path changes? So you can make sure it's the best decision.
That's a very difficult question. And I think
it is.
What is the process? So I think for me, it was always, I always looked for, in a sense, opportunities, perhaps not always actively, but there was it's a sort of search alert that you set up for a particular job that you would like to have one day, and then you kind of grow. It grows. The idea grows inside you. And when the right opportunity comes, I think everyone knows that it's something that they would like to try. It's very difficult to describe the process, but I think what is important is to perhaps have a target which may be very, very distant in the future, but also to have a job that you actually are doing now and you like it. I think that is important, because you may have an objective which is very long term, but if you are not happy in your current situation, that doesn't help. So yeah, I'm not sure that's a best answer.
I think it's a good answer. Yeah.
But for me, every single job that I had was a situation where I really liked what I was doing. And if it didn't feel okay, I try to kind of reposition myself a little bit, even without changing the institutions, but perhaps speaking to different people and shift a little bit, in a sense that whatever you do, you need to like it and you need to feel comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to have to stop you there. We have a bit more questions, but perhaps for the end of the webinar. It is now Neil's turn.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Raphael, for setting this up. Well, I started my career many years ago. I started my university career many years ago at Oxford University, and I studied general engineering science, and that covered many things: mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, thermodynamics, material science, all sorts of aspects of, and of course, as in most engineering subjects, a lot of maths. I was a sponsored student, which meant that a company, Marconi Space and Defence Systems, sponsored me, gave me some money for my during my university years, and I worked for them in the summer holidays for about 6 or 8 weeks a year, about 8 weeks a year, and I would be involved in real work with them. My final year project was a combined Oxford University Marconi Space and Defence System project, and it was computer modelling of a particular antenna structure. At that time, you didn't have the modelling tools that you do have today, so it was direct coding, and at that time it was Fortran, but I guess today it would be something like C or even Python. So we used to do modelling like that. Also did some measurements and proved everything. So I started Marconi Space Defence Systems, and I started in the antenna design department and computer modelling, because that's what I'd done for my final year project, and that's what I've worked with for Marconi in the summer holidays. And I stayed there for a number of years. The space segment was more to do with ground terminals than in space, although we did do, I did an antenna, a monitoring antenna for weather satellites called AMSU-B. So I did a little bit of actual in-space stuff. I did enjoy my time. I enjoyed antenna engineering, but I did like to, my background being more general, I did like to go to do some other parts of engineering, not just stick at, I'm not really a specialist person. I do like to see the whole system rather than stick in the detail. So I decided to look for another job, and I got another job at British Aerospace. And they had a sort of a complete they were working on a complete radar system at a very high frequency, 80 gigahertz at the time, which was very advanced. And it had antenna, radar, ranging, Doppler, all those kind of mathematical stuff, which I quite enjoyed. I could get involved as in the system department. I could get involved in many aspects of the project, from the electronics to how the system would work and how the radar actually worked, and the signal processing behind it. So it was very interesting. I stayed there for a number of years, but then the world changed. The Berlin Wall came down and defence was shrinking, and you could see that you wouldn't need so much defence spending, and BAE was British Aerospace was shrinking as well. So I decided to go to a company, and I decided to go contracting as well, as a kind of consultant rather than employee. and I went to a company called Thorn EMI. Now, Thorn EMI is you might have heard of Thorn. You might have heard of EMI Records. It's the same company, but I wasn't involved in the record side of it. But I worked on electromagnetic compatibility solutions and measurements. So they acted as consultants to many different organisations, not only military but oil industry, all sorts of organisations where they had EMC problems. EMC was becoming a big issue at that time, as electronics was becoming smaller and there were lots more of it, so it was becoming a big issue. So I got involved in that. One of the particular problem was the oil industry had a problem with stopping detonators going off, and we had to design the circuitry so that so it was EMC proof. So if you could hit it with tons of radio waves, and you wouldn't detonate you wouldn't trigger the detonator. We also did specialist measurement equipment for RF hazards, which is a particular problem on ships. So on a ship, you've got high power transmitters, and people and objects are very near those high power transmitters, and you can create yourself a large antenna, let's say from a ladder on a ship. The ladder might be metal, but it's not grounded to the ship, and you go and put your hand on it when one of these high power transmitters is going off, and you can get a severe electric shock, and if you're at the top of the ladder you could fall to the bottom. So it can be a serious problem. So we used to specialize in the measurement equipment, and there was a team that actually used to survey those ships. Again, Thorn EMI was dependent on the defence industry, and it was shrinking again. They were shrinking, and so I decided to make another move to the then growing mobile phone industry. So mobile phones, 2G mobile phones, as in GSM, which you probably don't know what that is, but 2G mobile phones digital mobile phones had just come out and were growing very, very fast. And there was a huge development program. So I decided to go into the mobile phone industry, and I moved to Ericsson in Stockholm. So I moved all the way to Stockholm, and worked on the mobile phone industry. Now, my previous experience was RF, radio frequency systems, such as radar and antennas and things like that. And that was very, very useful to me. And I had some experience in digital processing and modulation through my radar experience. So I could understand a mobile phone and how it worked. But again, on the way, I gave them my knowledge, but I picked up their knowledge, and I learned a lot about things like lib budgets and software architecture, highly organized layer systems, things like document management, and which was a little bit new to me because I'd always been slightly outside, and their production compared with what I'd been working to productions of tens or hundreds. These productions were like 30,000 a month, so the production numbers were much, much higher. I also learned a lot about how to manage that production as well. I wasn't a production engineer, but if things went wrong in production, the problem came to me often, and we'd have to sign off whether you could change this particular component for another component. But 30,000 a month isn't a big number. Things like PlayStation are much, much bigger. Again, there were another incident took place. The governments around the world decided to sell 3G licenses, auction them. So that took huge quantities of money out of the industry. So the industry was shrinking and getting rid of people. And I was a consultant, so I had to go, unfortunately. So then I moved to Airbus after living in Stockholm for, well, sort of 3 years and then another 3 years on and off. So I moved to Airbus. But again, my background in radar and radio RF systems and digital processing and everything else, it was an easy fit for me to go into payload architecture. So space is just a little bit different from the rest of engineering in that it has a very harsh environment. So you had to learn that side of it. But other than that, it was quite a simple step. My first satellite I was involved with was Eutelsat 8, which is a French-Italian satellite TV satellite for Eutelsat. And I was lucky. It was my first bid, and it was a successful win for Airbus at the time. And we followed on with 8, 9, and 10. A lot of the bids I did work on never came to anything. So I thought that was normal, but no, you get very few wins. So I also worked on a lot of digital process payloads. Having this background in antennas and digital processing, it was quite an easy step for me to understand something like Inmarsat and the complicated satellite that it was. I had to learn a lot of new stuff, but my background really helped me. And then a couple of years ago, I left Airbus to become a consultant to the Ministry of Defence, which is building the latest military satellites for the United Kingdom. It's been an interesting change. I'm now on the operator side, and I'm a satellite purchaser rather than a seller now. So that's an interesting change. And I'm now working at the higher level of the system, trying to integrate the satellite and the ground segment and all the terminals and everything else. So that's how I got here. Any questions?
And that's almost right on time. Congrats, Neil.
I was looking at the time.
Yeah. That's fine. That's perfect. Okay, questions. We have a first one, which is hi, Neil. Given that you mentioned that you're more of a generalist and not a specialist, what do you see as the values of what do you see are the values of moving around between roles and companies relatively frequently early on in your career?
On the specialist generalist, I think I think it goes to your personality really. Are you interested in the big picture and not worrying about the detail too much, or do you get a lot of satisfaction working in that detail and perfecting that detail? I think a lot of people enjoy working in the detail, or I think most people enjoy working in the detail and making it better and better and better. And I would say 90% of people are like that. And there's a few that are happy working at the high level with a general understanding. So I have an understanding of digital processes. I have an understanding of software. I have an understanding of antennas. I have an understanding of radio frequency systems. But there are better people than me that can design antennas, but at least I know what they're talking about. And the second part of the question was moving around companies, wasn't it?
Yeah, so as a generalist, so not a specialist, do you think it's better to move around companies?
As a general, that's a good question. Yes, I would on the having a wider experience and also taking the opportunity to learn something a bit extra. So every time you move a company, the company's structured in a different way from the last company. So you have to you bring your knowledge to a company, but you will learn something from that company because they're not structured in the same way as your previous companies. So you do learn more as a generalist, but you do risk, I guess, if you're a specialist. Well, I was also tied by economic circumstances. You know, the world changed, and I had to change with it.
Fair enough. We are short on time, but I'm going to ask one last question from Sam Ravi. If you could do one thing differently in your career path, what would it be?
Oh, with the benefit of hindsight, you mean?
Yeah. Like today, what do you think you could do differently?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I mean, knowing all the history now, would I have done? That's a difficult question. What I'll say is I haven't regretted changing company. I've never regretted having a change, moving, or you know, I might have been, you know, I might have been able to do much better for myself if I'd known that, let's say, defence was going to shrink massively in the 1990s or something. You know, I could have made better decisions perhaps, or maybe I'd have gone into mobile phones earlier. I think there was an opportunity to go into mobile phones in 1987, and maybe that was a mistake. I could have done that.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to Stephen.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So, yes, Stephen Brown. So, or maybe I'll start with a bit about my current role, and then explain to how I got here. So, as I said earlier, currently I'm the CTO of SatixFy Space Systems. SatixFy is a relatively small company. It's only a couple of hundred people. It's only recently gone public. And it's a company that basically does satellite stuff, both for the space segment, so in satellites, and also for ground and aeronautical terminals. It's a bit unusual because it's a fairly vertically integrated company. It does stuff from sort of, you know, fairly basic technology, component level stuff, so chips and stuff like that, all the way to sort of equipments and subsystems. So my role is a bit of a mixture, really. It's obviously engineering focus, hence the T in it. But it's a bit of product strategy and the definition of products, R&D and technology strategies. You know, trying to work out what are the next technologies that we should be pursuing, sort of, you know, in the longer term, the kind of 5-year kind of timescale. Quite a lot of talking to customers on the technical side of business development. So more often than not, it's me who is involved in the kind of initial engagement with customers. You know, they'll come to you with some kind of need, and it's doing the first bit of engineering to work out, right, how can we you know, work out what to sell them, how can we take some of our products and you know, satisfy whatever requirements they want. My role is very much focused in telecommunication satellites, but within that it's fairly broad. I do different types of systems, so geosynchronous systems, low Earth orbit systems, civil systems, military systems. As I mentioned, we do quite a lot of technology ourselves. So I get involved in different aspects of it. Phased array antenna design is quite a lot of that. Onboard computers, modems, networking. And then quite often end-to-end systems. It's not really something we do as a company, but the nice thing about being part of a small company that's trying to sort of advocate its own technology is that you kind of have to explain to other people how to use your technology. So it involves a lot of kind of systems engineering. And then I get to interact with lots of different types of people. So you know, all the various different disciplines, you know, digital, radio frequency, hardware design, software designers, thermal, mechanical engineer, all that sort of thing. So it's quite a varied role, which is something I like. And there's always lots of different things to think about and stuff to learn. So it's quite an engaging job from that point of view. I guess in many respects, I'm a bit like Neil in the sense that I'm more of a generalist than a specialist. So although I do lots of different things, which is very interesting, on the flip side is I get very little time to spend on any given subject. That actually appeals to me. You know, I just prefer it that way. It may not appeal to everyone, and I think some people, as Neil said, you know, do like to specialize in things and then take time to do it. And you see a lot of people who make very good careers for themselves, being a real expert in whatever discipline it is, you know, antennas or RF engineering or whatever they do. But I'm a bit more like Neil. I'm more of a generalist. Satisfy, as I said, it's a small company. The nice thing about small companies, particularly startups, we're not really a startup anymore, but is that they tend to be a bit more dynamic than larger companies. There can in my experience be a tendency for bigger companies to pigeonhole people a little bit, and that's because big companies like to have a big pool of experts that they can draw from. Smaller companies can't afford that luxury because they just don't have the manpower. However, there are some advantages of working for a bigger company I'll mention later. So that's my current role. How I got here, a much simpler career path than either Cassia and Neil, much less interesting, so it'll be easy to explain. So my background is physics. I did a degree in physics, didn't know what to do, so I did a PhD in physics. Then I didn't know much about what I wanted to do other than I probably needed to earn more money than was available in academia. There wasn't a great deal of thought that went into my career, but I got into the space industry because it's a kind of cottage industry. You know, it's there's lots of different kind of jobs you can do in there. There was it tends to be maybe more of an academic bent than some other careers you can go into in engineering, and all of that appealed to me since I sort of came from a kind of half academic side. So I think for me, the space industry was a good thing. I personally have a PhD. I don't think it's necessary. I personally found it useful and I enjoyed doing my PhD, but you know, I certainly wouldn't think it's a prerequisite. When I worked in Airbus, there was a bit of snobbery about that there was people like employing PhD students. I'm not sure how useful that is. I think with a PhD student, you do probably get quite a good candidate, but there are many other good candidates anyway. But my first role out of my PhD was working at Airbus. I did digital signal processing. It was pretty detailed stuff, actually, so completely the opposite of what I do now. I'm glad I did it, though. You know, doing that rather than going into more general systems engineering, because it did give me quite a good grounding in basic telecommunications, which is, you know, important technology for what I do at the moment. So I think if you're starting your career, and even if you want to become a generalist, I think there's no harm in maybe spending 2 or 3 years doing something quite detailed. It's you know, it's often a good way in. You can do something quite detailed, and then naturally you'll find something else that interests you around the subject, and you can move into that. And big companies like Airbus, particularly early career, are quite good at facilitating that kind of opportunity. And more generally, big companies can be quite a nice choice for early career, simply because they tend to offer quite a structured approach to career progression. That's one advantage. And another thing is they tend to have quite a lot of good role models and people who have time to mentor you. Smaller companies will tend to struggle with that, if I'm honest, simply because they just don't have the scale for this kind of thing. However, the calculus is a bit different, kind of mid to late career, where realistically you tend to sort of be diverted more towards a fixed role. Particularly if you take a technical role, you will tend to, for want of a better word, be pigeonholed. So and probably the only way out of that is kind of move company. So I did various things at Airbus. As I mentioned, DSP, I did FPGA and a bit of ASIC design. Mostly it was systems engineering, though, in various bits and pieces, different kind of programs. And eventually, after some time, I got the opportunity to lead a systems engineering team in a fairly large product development, which I really enjoyed. And I also had a line management role, again, a similar size number of people. And I think anyone who goes into a technical role, unless you really don't want to do it, and some people don't, I think they're both very interesting things to do. Personally, I enjoyed line management. It maybe wasn't the most favorite part of my job, but the technical lead role, I think, is a good role, and it's quite a nice target for, you know, sort of maybe 5 or 7 years into your career, if you built up enough kind of experience in a certain area to you know, lead a big team and actually sort of be the person driving the development. So yeah, that's, in my view, definitely worth doing. After you've done that, I guess, you know, there tends to be a bit of a fork in the road for your career. Some people go into management, often general management. I personally didn't want to do that. I wanted to remain technically focused. So after that, I did a couple of different things. I didn't want to stay doing the same thing, so I moved into more of a kind of, again, the kind of technical support to business development. I did that for a while, and then I ran an R&D team, which was very interesting. So looking at lots of different technologies, including things like photonics and stuff like that, and had the benefit of being able to learn quite a lot from Cassia on that. Right, someone's just ringing me. Hopefully everyone can still hear me.
Yep.
Right. So, and as I said, I think I'm more of a generalist than a specialist, and that probably fits well with my current role as CTO. I prefer the big picture. The details are equally important, and I think it's, you know, my advice to anyone would be, do what you think fits best. You know, if you find a particular thing, become passionate about it, and you really want to pursue it, you know, do that. You know, don't try and fight it. And similarly, if you're maybe a bit more like me and you get maybe a bit bored after a while and you prefer to just sort of hop around, then do that. I don't think there's a hard or fast rule about it. I think it's more, you know, driven by your personality. I think for the main thing for most people with a technically focused role is they tend to enjoy learning quite a lot, and that's something you probably need to consider doing throughout your career, because, to be honest, if you stop doing that, your career will tend to plateau a bit. I think that's more or less it. I you know, I was mostly spent most of my career at Airbus. I did do a bit of consulting for a while, which was kind of fun, but, you know, not really for me. And then I got my current role. I didn't move around nearly as much as Neil or Cassia. Partly there were personal circumstances involved there. My wife had kids, so she was on a relatively low income, or not working for quite a few years. And then she started a business, and wasn't earning much until that took off. So I, if you like, was the kind of, you know, the sort of the dependable income. So it was that probably a large part of the reason for not moving around. Actually, the good thing about working for a company like Airbus is that, although in the end I got a bit frustrated with it, and there wasn't so much opportunity to move around, it took quite a long time to get to that point. Airbus is quite a big company, and there were plenty of things to do. So to keep me amused during that time.
Okay.
So, yeah, got the right amount of time there.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. So I think we can start with questions asked to you, Stephen. So there is only one yet, but I mean, if you have questions for Stephen, go for it. And then once that dries out, we can start receiving questions for everyone. So if you have a question on your career and you want to have an answer from everyone here, everyone can answer, from Neil, Cassia, or Stephen. Okay, so the first question is, okay, since telecom is a field that faces such a growth in this moment, what are your prospects of evolution in terms of the technology you develop in your company?
It is pretty good. Telecoms is still, as you say, it's an evolving field. Recognised such by governments. If you look at the UK government, they've reorganised things and they've got a new department for that. But one of the 5 key areas of that is telecommunications. You also see that with the 5G, which is now largely developed, and then people start talking about 6G. So I think telecommunications is not just within space, but outside as well. It's a very good field to be in. It's I think technically quite interesting. Still, I think fairly fast-paced in terms of technology development. There are lots of different areas you can get into. I think some of the speakers here have kind of touched on some of those areas. Neil with kind of RF and antennas, and Cassie with photonics and stuff, and I guess me with a lot of digital. So lots of different technologies you can get involved in. So I think it still remains quite a fast-paced and interesting career to pursue, with good general prospects. I think Cassia made the point about being able to move into the space industry. I think there is probably scope to move out the space industry as well. It's those general skills you get that are important.
One other question is, I think that's quite a generic one, but I think it's a good one to ask you, Stephen, perhaps, because we've asked that to Neil as well. Oh, no, it's not actually. What was the hardest career decision you've had to make, and why did you make it?
I'm not sure I ever did make many hard decisions.
Come on, surely.
I guess no. To be honest, leaving Airbus was maybe a bit of a hard decision at the time, because I'd been there a long time, and of course you end up becoming a bit part of the furniture, maybe, and that, and you've accumulated quite a good pension, and then going to a startup, particularly with a young family, and the need to earn an income was maybe a bit difficult. It's worked out so far. So yeah, it's that was probably the hardest, leaving Airbus and then kind of moving around after that.
Amory's asking, and that's the last question for you, Stephen, and then anyone can answer between you and Neil, Stephen and Cassia. Thanks for sharing the details, Stephen. Does your company offer internships or opportunities to researchers?
Yeah, not really, no, is the answer. And again, this is part of being a small company. We're just not geared up for that sort of thing. I think bigger companies, like an Airbus or other companies of that size, are much better. They've got the size and they've got the sort of internal support network to facilitate that. It's harder for a small company. Generally, they want employees. That's it's just the way it is. It's difficult to support.
Okay, so a question for everyone, Neil, Stephen, and Cassia. If you were to change positions now, with nothing to stop you, where would you go or do?
That's an interesting question. So, as you can believe, I'm slightly older than the others. So my next steps will be probably, I'm not looking for a long-term job. I'm not looking for long-term. So I'm quite happy to sort of hop around where I can get work. And it could be anywhere. Something might take my fancy. That might be interesting. I'll see what it's like. And the other thing is, you can always leave a job. I've always gone, well, I'll change jobs, and this looks interesting. But if it doesn't work out, I can always change jobs again. You can always. It's not a one-way process where you risk losing everything. So I don't know it, but it could be, you know, anywhere. It could be US, it could be Dubai, you know, like Yarsat or something like that. Go there for a year or two. I'll be see what it's like. Anyone else?
Yes, Stephen, do you have your answers as well? Any answers to that?
Me, I think if I you know, no other kind of considerations, so not having to earn money for family or anything like that, I think I'd just go a bit crazy, and I would literally just find jobs I enjoyed doing. I probably would jump around a lot more. You know, I think my ideal time to work on something would be about 3 to 6 months, and then that would be it. I'll be off. I wouldn't mind moving to another field, you know, something like AI or something like that would be interesting to do. Obviously now I'm in my early 40s. That is not a realistic prospect, but you know, as a fantasy, that would be an interesting thing to pursue.
Right, and I'm going to answer differently because I think I would stay.
Oh.
But I mean, for the moment it's great, but it's also the element that I've joined agency fairly recently, and I think there is for me still a lot to learn. So I wouldn't move necessarily before kind of having that feeling that, well, it's time to go towards something new. So I'm still learning, and it's exciting. And yeah, I would say, well, perhaps there was a question about the trip to Mars. So if
yes, there is one.
I may be too old as well, but I would sign up for that if we speak about no limits. Yeah.
Would you go, Neil and Stephen, if you had the choice and there was no other thing blocking you? Would you go to Mars?
No.
Sitting in? No.
I wouldn't go, but who was it? I can't remember. The House of Lords is a scientist. I can't remember his name now. But he said that when you're old enough, you know, he would take the one-way ticket. And maybe if I got old enough and thinking, well, there's not much going on around here, I haven't got long left, I might take that one-way ticket.
Consulting on Mars.
Yes.
Oh, that's a very good question we have. What experience from each other careers would you like to borrow? To steal from?
For me, I was going to say, for me, Stephen's DSP knowledge. That would be. I'd like to have that detail, and Kasia obviously her photonics knowledge. I'd love to know about that. That would be really interesting.
I've already stolen quite a lot from Neil and Kasia. I work with both of them, and the enjoyable thing about that and working with people who do have different experiences and backgrounds is that you do learn a lot, and that can be very nice. You know, talking to other people who have different technical backgrounds, you do learn a lot.
Yeah, it's true, and I very much can confirm that in a sense, learning one from another, it's really, really important. And as for me, I've been mostly specialized towards one domain, so obviously I would still the ability to see that bigger picture from about Neil and Stephen.
Okay. There are no other questions, I think. So I think that's the end of our webinar. So there is, if you look at the screen being shared, I think there is a QR code in the top right corner. You can just take a photo of that and then go on the survey. And there is a survey, and you can actually say if you liked the webinar, if you didn't like it, complain a lot, or not complain at all, and say it was amazing. So feel free to go on this QR code and flash it and fill the form now. And I would like to thank you all for joining. I would like to thank our speakers who joined at this hour on a Friday. Yeah, it was an amazing webinar for me anyway.
Thank you, Raphael, for organizing, and thank you everyone for joining us indeed on Friday evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone. Thanks, Raphael.
You're welcome. All right.